Hey guys, Jawad here with Hit the Apex podcast. How are we doing this week? Thank you for tuning in, and boy, what a week it's been. What a week it's been. And you know what? For the first time in, I don't even know how long it's been now since the Australian Grand Prix and since the coronavirus and all that basically took over our news and lives and everything, but it felt for the first time in a long time like a normal week, and with huge news coming out. If you read my tweet last night on the Hit the Apex page, I said, yeah, I get the feeling we're going to get some driver news Thursday night, so I refrained from doing the podcast on Thursday. Said, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow, which is today, which is Friday. Happy Friday, everyone. And yeah, this was basically kicked off earlier in the week when it was announced by Ferrari that they will be going their separate ways from Sebastian Vettel, announcing the end of a 6-year partnership. It was kind of when, if, it was a matter of when, not if it was going to happen. Now, I apologise too if you hear some power tools in the background. There's some technicians working outside on some other units. So, yeah, it's not as bad as it was this morning. Got a bit of a rude wake-up call. But, it's if you hear that, apologies for that. But a lot to talk about, of course, with the Vettel separation from Ferrari. Of course, who replaced him as well. They've already made that announcement. Carlos Sainz, moving from McLaren to Ferrari on a 2-year deal. Daniel Ricciardo was part of this as well, with McLaren quickly moving in to confirm that he'll be stepping in for Carlos Sainz from 2021. So he's leaving Renault. And then I guess, everything up in the air about, Sebastian Vettel's future, where he's going to go, whether he'll retire and everything. So talk a bit about that too on this week's podcast. And of course, Ferrari and where their biggest problem kind of lies, because I don't think it is to do with the drivers. So without further ado, kicking it off, and big, I think the timing was the shock. It wasn't more so, he's out, but it was more so the timing, because given that we actually haven't had a race yet in 2020, you would have thought that maybe there was going to be a few races before we decide who's going to be where for the next season, 2021. Remember, 21 is going to be basically a continuation of 2020. So with the rules now, the big rule change being shifted back to 22, and 21 basically just, to the point where they're actually going to freeze, or they're talking about freezing development of the current cars just as a cost-saving exercise. So I guess the story with Vettel and Ferrari, both parties were unable to agree terms for an extension for just 21. So apparently there was only a 1-year extension on the table for Sebastian Vettel. There was also, a role for him as well, given that the team have now pretty much committed to Charles Leclerc. And you kind of knew back in, I think, was it January or sometime in the pre-season when they announced that they had extended Charles Leclerc into the 2024 season till the end of 2024, locked him in till then, a long-term deal. And, I guess the big thing about this was Ferrari never go for a rookie driver, he wasn't a rookie, Leclerc. He was going into his second season, but a driver as young as Leclerc, 21 years old, haven't seen them do anything like that before. So it was a big step for them last year to get Leclerc into the team. Won a couple of races. He had so many pole positions. He was quick. He finished ahead of his teammate in the championship too, which was, probably a big crucial part of this decision as well, to offer an extension to Seb and say, look, this is what we want to do. Do you want to buy into it or not? If not, then we can go our separate ways. And of course, with that, there would have been less cash on the table too. But from the statement issued by Sebastian Vettel, or the joint statement with Ferrari, Seb indicated that money had no part in his decision. So Yeah, and here's a quote from that too. It's vital for all parties to work in perfect harmony. And he talked about how in this time away from racing, or given the suspension in play that we've got at the moment, that he's had the chance to reflect on our real priorities, and something about using imagination to adopt a new approach. So whether he's hinting at what he's going to do in the future, which is a big talking point now, given that we've got Ricciardo confirmed for McLaren and Sainz confirmed as Vettel's replacement at Ferrari. Sebastian Vettel's a big name on the market, and where does he go? There's going to be some talk about that a bit later, but retirement could be a possibility as well. So with that, let's look back at what Seb has achieved for Ferrari. Of course, he was brought into the team in 2015 with the promise that he would lead a revival for the team, who have not won a championship since 2007. It's been more than a decade now. Yes, I like to remind everyone about that. I know we, in the past, have done quite a bit of Ferrari bashing and Sebastian Vettel bashing, but I think it's important to proportion the blame equally amongst Vettel and Ferrari. I know Vettel has made a lot of mistakes, and I've got like a little rap sheet. It's almost like a career criminals rap sheet, this. But go back to 2017, Baku, the little incident with Lewis Hamilton, then Singapore as well, a race which they should have won, and it was a key race for the championship because it kind of swung the momentum towards Lewis Hamilton. Japan as well, DNF there. Then you fast forward to 2018, looking really good again in the first half of the season, but then we get to the German Grand Prix. He's in a winning position. He had the race pretty much sewn up, and then boom, into the wall in the stadium section, and that was the win gone and championship gone too. So I think key moments like that. Then Monza as well, getting involved with Lewis Hamilton and spinning of his own accord. Japan with Max Verstappen as well. And it's important in all these incidents, it's been Seb that's been the one to blame. It hasn't been because of another driver or anything. Then 2019, of course, a bit more difficult given that Ferrari weren't really in championship contention. But, opportunity to win a race in Canada was all sewn up until the end, where he went off the track and almost put Lewis Hamilton in the wall. Contentious, I know. Still, you could argue about that, whether it was just or not. But at the end of the day, the penalty was given, and, it can be argued that he should have tried a different approach there. I'd have to go back and review all that and do a whole nother podcast talking about Canada 2019, but it was just one of those moments where, he put himself into that position. So, it's how you react to it is what's going to go down in history, and unfortunately for him, it was not the right way. But, of course, Ferrari with their own problems as well, which I'll talk about as well a bit later. So, as well, you look at the arrival of Leclerc in 2019, displaces his position within the team like Daniel Ricciardo did back in 2014 when Ricciardo arrived at Red Bull. But let's have a look at the stats and see, how, I guess, good his tenure was at Ferrari, even though you could probably remember it as a failure. 14 wins, 12 pole positions, 54 podiums across the 6 years. Finished runner-up twice in the championship in 2017 and 18. But I guess it's kind of, flattering when you look at that, but then look at how those championships ended, where, the first half of the season he was very much neck and neck with Lewis Hamilton, and he was in the lead as well for some time. But then when it comes to the second half, it kind of just fell away. Just sudden drop, and then it didn't even go down to the wire, the championship race in those particular seasons. Hamilton was able to wrap him up. I think 17, it was in Mexico, 18 as well in Mexico or Austin around that time. So with a couple of races still in hand. So it just, we criticise them a lot back then about, not being able to put together two halves of a season because, 20 race season, 19 race season. They've got to go for the whole, make sure they're consistent all the way throughout. And then, obviously Seb's mistakes kind of contributed to it. But as I say, not, the ultimate reason of their downfall. So why will it be remembered as a failure? Well, obviously because they didn't win any championships, but Seb went to Ferrari with huge expectations on him. He was already a four-time world champion, and that's, I think, something that a lot of people forget when they do come out and bash him, that he is, one of only 5 drivers in Formula One who have won more than 4 championships or 4 or more championships. So he's got 4 championships. He's always, throughout his career, been likened to Michael Schumacher, 7 world championships, of course. A great mentor to Vettel as well back in the day, and, good to see them actually race together back, between 2010 and 2012 when Schumacher was at Mercedes. But ultimately he was unable to emulate his idol and, of course, even lead the revival of Ferrari. They had their own issues throughout their years, and it just kind of came away to nothing. And it's kind of sad because Ferrari now have gone through 2 multiple world champions, of course, Fernando Alonso back in the early part of the previous decade, and, now Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, has gone through and was unable to do what Kimi Räikkönen did back in 2007, win a championship. So, I guess it's pretty sad that it's had to end on that note. You thought all the acrimony and the bitterness with the Alonso departure was bad, but I guess, I guess this is not bitter, but just kind of sad that we didn't get to see that fairy tale come to fruition with, German driver driving a Ferrari, emulating what his idol did back in the early 2000s and winning all those championships. So, let's talk about now who replaced him. And I think there were more people perhaps licking their lips and very eager after the announcement that Vettel was leaving Ferrari over who would be the replacement, because, of course, Ferrari is, the Ferrari seat is one of the coveted drives on the grid in Formula One, no matter where Ferrari are, if they're, winning championships or not, as they have been in the last, more than a decade now. So basically, every driver and his dog would have been on the phone to Mattia Binotto trying to suss out, or, the managers of the drivers trying to suss out what's going on. But we had Daniel Ricciardo initially the front runner, and that ultimately, within 12 hours kind of just dissipated and wasn't going to happen, and it was Carlos Sainz that emerged as the favourite to take the seat, and indeed it was revealed, though it was Daniel Ricciardo announced by McLaren first, and a little goodbye note for Carlos Sainz, and that pretty much confirmed that Sainz would be confirmed by Ferrari, which it was not too long later last night or Thursday morning in Europe. So 2-year deal for Carlos Sainz at Ferrari, of course, confirming that they're going to have the youngest driver lineup in 50 years. The case for Sainz, I didn't really because I'm a secret McLaren fan. Well, there's no secret about that. Have been for many, many years now. I kind of didn't want Carlos to go because, I felt that he was nestled down at McLaren. He had increased involvement as well, with the development of this year's car, the MCL 35, as did Lando Norris too. So you could feel that they were building towards something. But I guess when Ferrari dangle the carrot, anyone's got to come and take it, So unless your name's Lewis Hamilton and even Ayrton Senna, I think, or I don't even know if Ferrari ever offered Senna a deal. I'd have to go back through the history books to find that one out. But, Sainz apparently had been on Ferrari's radar for some time, and a lot of people will say that, basically they just want a compliant number 2 driver to go next to Leclerc because he is their prospect. But there's more more of a case for Sainz than there is, say, for a Ricciardo. Like Ricciardo, obviously a lot older at the moment, 5 years difference between he and Sainz. You could say maybe Ricciardo's going into the prime of his career, so he might be more desperate to win a world championship, where Sainz at 25, probably not, but, will still be able to be fast, consistent, do what he's been doing. And it's important to say as well, and I wrote this in the article I wrote last night for the Raw, that Sainz has been kind of F1's quiet achiever. When he debuted back in 2015 at Toro Rosso, he debuted alongside Max Verstappen, and naturally all the attention was around Verstappen, of course, and the eyes were all on him, other teams trying to see if they could snap him up, but of course Red Bull got in. And then when Red Bull saw the opportunity, not even a year later, to promote him, just over a year later, to put him in the top team, the Red Bull racing team, they didn't hesitate, obviously with the demotion of Danny Kvyat. So it showed that Red Bull had firmly placed their eggs into the Verstappen basket, but I guess Sainz didn't take this to heart. A lot of drivers that have been talked about as being, they've had their careers ended by the Red Bull program and everything, but Sainz, was kind of the quiet achiever, did what he needed to do. He was, often on the same pace and, in terms of qualifying and everything with Verstappen as well, just, microseconds basically separating them. But Verstappen's got the more flamboyant racecraft, where Sainz is very, let's say a lot more composed. But that being said, he's always brought home the results. So, he's always been able to take a car that's not as good to some good results. And, we saw with Toro Rosso 2016 in Brazil, was able to, in the wet conditions, go over to 6th. Some good results too when he was at Renault, of course, because he did spend that year and a couple of months at Renault. Before there, he was hoping to continue, but then Renault kind of swooped in on Daniel Ricciardo and left Carlos Sainz hanging in the lurch, and then basically at the 11th hour was able to sign a deal with McLaren for 2019. So, it's funny how these two, they've had their paths cross in their careers a couple of times now, and I'm sure, we're going to see that in the Netflix, the season 3 of the Netflix show Drive to Survive, because there was a little episode on them for season 2 with both of them at their new teams after what happened the year before in 2018. So he's a no-nonsensical guy. He's clean-cut. He's professional as well. He's got that image I'm sure that Ferrari will really appreciate, of course. The marketability around him, being the son of rallying legend Carlos Sainz as well, even though Sainz Jr. is basically his own person. He's established his own identity and his own reputation. So I really look forward to seeing Sainz in a Ferrari, even though I will never wear anything with the Ferrari logo on it. I would really look forward to seeing him, and it would be sad if they just relegate him to a number 2 role alongside Leclerc, but I think there can be some healthy competition there between the two, so that'll be good. Ricciardo to McLaren, I guess Ricciardo's problem with Renault was that Renault promised him when he came there that they would be closing the gap to the big teams, which in 2019 they didn't do. They went backwards. There's no sugarcoating that, and I don't get why Renault are salty about this. They came out, and Cyril Abiteboul in the statement didn't even wish Ricciardo best of luck for the future, and instead talked about how commitment and that sort of stuff is meant to be unwavering. But it just, it's, I don't really see anything positive about Renault at the moment. It's kind of sad, given this team, or the Enstone team in particular, who I always have a soft spot for, have been through the ringer the last few years, since basically Lotus went bust and they were bleeding money, and Renault decided they're going to come back in as a works team and take over the Enstone base, and then it took them a few years to get that back up and running and upgrade all the facilities, and now we're living in this world that's been dominated by a pandemic where businesses and manufacturers and all that are in a bit of a financial crisis, and there's talk about Renault potentially even assessing their options and look at quitting Formula One. So it's kind of, from a career point of view, Ricciardo, some people will say, oh, he's just made a sidestep, but there is a good case for McLaren moving into the future, and that's why, I was looking forward to the combination of Norris and Sainz together, because next year, 2021, they're going to get the Mercedes engine. Who knows how that's going to work, if there's going to be a freeze on chassis development from this year. And then 22, when the new rules come in, there's going to be the cost cap as well on performance, so limit to $145 million a year, which for a team like McLaren is a perfect opportunity to kind of level the playing field and make sure that they can catch up to the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull. So the case for McLaren has been there since last year, and I thought, well, they're going to stay committed to Sainz and Norris, or those drivers are going to stay committed to the team. But the case for Ricciardo is that he's going to have a better opportunity with McLaren to win races, if not be in a championship contender by 2022, than he was going to be with Renault. Renault, it just seems, they're talking about commitment and all that sort of stuff, not being committed to the team, but their long-term future, or even short to mid-term future, seems unlikely, or seems very clouded. So it's kind of a bit rich from Renault to have those kind of comments. But again, I guess Renault are the salty type. I kind of dislike them more every day, when I see this sort of stuff. So which is sad, because I've always been an Enstone fan, with Lotus, and then even Renault with Alonso back in the day. But yeah, it's all up to Renault and their commitment to the sport, whether they're going to stay. So good move, if you ask me. Ricciardo to McLaren, joining Lando Norris, two of the biggest trolls in the F1 paddock. I mean, that's going to be, imagine all the media conferences and everything with both those guys. It's going to leave you in stitches every time. And just the direction in which the team is going at the moment too. I mean, I can't, not because I'm a fan or anything, but not because I'm a big fan of them, but just the way that they've been able to lead this revival, with Zach Brown basically clearing house and starting from scratch, different management style to Ron Dennis, and all the people have gone past, and they've got James Key now as their technical director, and car maker. That just sounds very kindergarten. As their technical chief, Andreas Stella stepped up as well in his role there. Andreas Seidel, of course, having come over, and his impact on the team last year was evident, and he is going to continue leading them forward. So it's looking really good for them at the moment. And of course, getting Mercedes power back on board, which, people have said under the current rules, it's going to be hard for them to beat the factory Mercedes team in a championship, given that the factory or the works team wins all the time. But when we get an equal playing field in 2022, with the rules, kind of resetting everything, then we'll see. Or, if you believe the rumours, Mercedes might pull out, and McLaren might be the factory Mercedes team once again. But anyway, I'm not reading too much into that. I know Eddie Jordan, everyone says that he's usually right with everything he predicts and everything, but yeah, I'm not going to read too much into that at the moment, unless it kind of gains a bit more traction. I mean, they've been talking about pulling out of the sport since last year, so I know the pandemic kind of changes everything and everyone's priorities change as a result of this, but yeah, I'm not reading into it until it actually starts gaining traction. But good moves ultimately. Sainz, good partner for Leclerc. It's going to be exciting seeing two young drivers at Ferrari as well. And then McLaren, of course, with Ricciardo and Norris. And it's hard to think that we haven't actually turned a wheel yet in 2020. Not even a practice session. Yet we're more looking forward to 2021 now when we see these guys at their new teams. And if it is going to be without Sebastian Vettel, of course it's going to be a bit of a hollow moment because you're losing a world champion off your grid. So that's that. Silly season has been triggered. You got names like Valtteri Bottas on the table, Nico Hülkenberg, Antonio Giovinazzi, who, let's be honest, wasn't going to be ready for Ferrari next year, no matter what. Even if he's going to be the foil for Leclerc, you need someone who's going to be fast as well, because the Constructors' Championship is quite important too, and that's something that Ferrari haven't won either for more than a decade. And can we really just stop talking about Fernando Alonso? I mean, I like the guy, but it seems that any time that there's something going on, silly season-wise in F1, his name is mentioned. And now he's been linked to the drive at Renault. Or before it was like, oh, he might go back to Ferrari. Yeah, nah. Sorry, that's not going to happen after all the bridges he burned there. And potentially go back to Renault? Why? If Ricciardo thought Renault weren't going to be good enough to win races with, then why would Alonso? He must be mad. And that's the reason potentially Sebastian Vettel might not go to Renault either. It might be seen as a backwards move. He's 32, he's still young, but he's got a family, he's got a wife, he's got kids as well. That could be an option for him to step away and retire, sit by the beach and watch the sunset with his kids. But yeah, the option for Renault is open there. He's got a prior relationship, of course, when he was winning championships with Renault Power at Red Bull. Bit of a left field choice. They've talked about potentially Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton be partner to him, but again, that's very left field, given that Hamilton has often publicly said that he prefers working with Valtteri Bottas and everything, and that was kind of key in keeping Bottas there for this year, because Bottas has only been getting 1-year deals ever since he came to Mercedes in 2017. So I guess if it wasn't for Hamilton by his side, they might have replaced him with someone like an Ocon. And then, of course, you got George Russell in the mix as well going into the future. So I guess I'm going to play it safe and say, as long as Hamilton's at Mercedes, and he might not be for much longer, I mean, he's talked about what life outside of Formula One will be for him too. He's got other things he wants to do. And of course, he's one championship away from equaling Michael Schumacher's record as well. So it might not be until Lewis Hamilton moves on from Mercedes that we see them completely change their lineup. So while Hamilton's there, let's safely say that Bottas gets to keep his seat too. Not that Bottas doesn't deserve a seat, of course. I'm a big fan of Bottas as well. I think he's done a superb job given the circumstances. And it's kind of a shame not to see him, having been a championship contender or won a championship just yet. Like, go back to 2014 when he and Ricciardo had breakout seasons for Williams and Red Bull. I was like, these two are going to be world champions, but it's almost like we've skipped a generation now. We've skipped over them. I mean, they've still got time. They're only, in their 30s, early 30s. But, with Verstappen now at Red Bull and lockdown at Red Bull, Ferrari committing to Leclerc, and of course bringing Carlos Sainz into the fold as well, and then Mercedes with their own juniors if they're going to, hang around. You can firmly see that the next world champion is going to be one of these young guys, and that just it's a positive thing, of course, moving into another generation for Formula One. But it's kind of sad that it kind of skipped a generation where you guys like Sergio Perez, who's been great. He's basically midfield. King of the midfield now. Daniel Ricciardo, Nico Hülkenberg as well, who didn't even get a podium while he was racing. He could potentially come back. Renault could grovel to him after they kicked him out at the end of last year for Ocon. And then, of course, Bottas. These guys are kind of going to maybe finish their careers without a championship, but of course there's still time, and Ricciardo to McLaren could be a step closer for him there instead of a step to the side. So I don't know. It's tough, and we might have to wait now a little bit until... we might even wait till racing resumes to find out what Sebastian Vettel's future is going to be. Some people have tossed around Aston Martin, possibly, given that Aston Martin will do a takeover of Racing Point for 2021. But you would have thought, given that Lawrence Stroll owns the team, he's going to keep his son there, Lance, and then Sergio Perez, who's been with the team for a long time, since 2014, and he's signed a multi-year extension as well recently, given that he's got, wealthy partners and investors that bring a lot of money to the team, that they would keep their lineup the same. So it's, stranger things have happened. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all the other pieces fall into the silly season puzzle. But yeah, I guess the thing that kind of you got to look at as well, as I mentioned before, is the impact of this financial crisis that is affecting everyone all over the world in whatever industry you're in, and whether Renault and the other OEMs, the original engine manufacturers, are they going to stay committed to Formula One, or are they going to look at their options? Because it's one thing that, they've got a cost cap coming in and everything, but there are some who still pretty, against it. Let's say Ferrari, for example, who are now talking about, given the fact that introducing a cost cap means they're going to have to, limit staff as well. And they're talking about potentially going over to somewhere like IndyCar or sports car racing to be able to redistribute the staff that would have to lose their jobs in Formula One as a result of the cost cap. So that's not saying Ferrari is going to quit Formula One because of the cost cap. It just means that money that they are now saving, they're going to redistribute that towards an IndyCar program or a sports car program. So at least the staff that work currently that will no longer be required as a result of the cost cap can go elsewhere in Ferrari and still at least have a job with Ferrari doing other things. So that'd be kind of exciting to see them in IndyCar, third engine manufacturer in IndyCar, alongside the Chevrolet and Honda, and of course sports car as well, given that we've got, this new convergence between IMSA and the WEC, and a few manufacturers kind of interested now, given that it's going to be a lot cheaper for them to race with these convergence rules instead of going out and building a bespoke hypercar or homologating a hypercar there. So that's a conversation for another time, but it would be exciting to see Ferrari do that. So what now for Seb? Who knows? It's up in the air, but retirement is firmly an option. And I guess one thing that no one's really talked about in these reports and in these discussions is that, what if Kimi Räikkönen too? He only signed a 2-year deal with Alfa Romeo when he got the boot from Ferrari a couple of years back, and that 2-year deal runs out at the end of the year. What if Kimi Räikkönen retires and paves the way for Sebastian Vettel to go out to pasture at Alfa Romeo? That's a potential too. So there's still a lot of opportunity, but again, for Seb, it's going to be a big step back wherever he goes, unless a new team decides to pop up on the grid and, suddenly is on the ball straight away. So, yeah, very difficult to say at the moment, but it's been a lot to digest this week, what we've seen, and as I said, it's like the first dose of normality that we've had in motorsport news for a while, because everything has been due to the pandemic or due to COVID-19. Yeah, it seems normal, even though it's been a bit of a full-on week. So now going back to what I was saying before about Ferrari, and perhaps their biggest problem lies beyond the drivers, and there is a fair case for this too, given the fact that it's been a decade since or more than a decade since they've won a championship. But then you look at all the drivers that have come and gone in that time, chiefly being Fernando Alonso, two-time champion who came close to winning the title twice for Ferrari but failed to get it done, and of course Sebastian Vettel's tenure now, where there was a couple of opportunities, but again it's reasons on the team side, driver side, and I want to highlight the things on the team side. So with Alonso, we've talked about that, to death basically. 2012 could have been a much better season if they had a better car. So that was basically all Alonso's efforts in 2012 to be able to win there. 2010, obviously that came down to them making a poor strategy call, which is something that we've seen quite a bit of in Sebastian Vettel's tenure there at Ferrari too. Countless strategic blunders, but it's the internal stability has kind of never been there. It's a team that run highly on emotion. You've got to be very passionate about the brand and about Ferrari and everything. And sometimes that emotion, I guess, kind of is the weakness for them as well. So you wouldn't see that at Mercedes or even Red Bull when they were dominating. They were very clinical about how they went about things, and you very rarely saw them make these kind of on-track mistakes, strategic errors and wrong development choices, as we saw with Ferrari in 18 and 19. In 19 they were kind of fastest in testing, they were showboating and like, oh yeah, we're going to have the best season ever. And then we get to the first race and they don't even, they finish 30 seconds behind the race winner, Bottas. And, we had a Honda-powered Red Bull on the podium ahead of Ferrari, who finished like 4th and 5th and kind of way back in somewhere in St Kilda. So, yeah, the internal stability, I think, is something you got to really question with Ferrari. They lost James Allison in 2016, of course. He, with personal issues that he had to deal with and to move back to the UK. The death of Sergio Marchionne, who was the president of Ferrari as well, was a significant a significant moment in this timeline too, given that he was committed to getting this racing team back to where it was and to be winning championships. He kind of, ruled with an iron fist and said, look, if you can't win, then there's no point us doing this kind of thing. So there's that. Then, while you had Maurizio Arrivabene, the previous team principal, come in 2015 with Seb, and basically kind of the leader for this revival, and all things were going well, there was a bit of a revolt against him in 2018 where, it saw him lose his position within the team. It saw Mattia Binotto promoted in 2019. But what did that achieve, really? You could say, I guess, once you're done with Ferrari, you're done. There's no coming back and everything, and everyone's kind of partial to one side or the other. So that's the kind of things that they've got to iron out for the future. Yeah, we got Sainz, we got Leclerc, we got an exciting young driver lineup, but the onus will be on the team to be able to execute as well, because I've waxed lyrical about Mercedes for the last few years, about how they've been able to get the job done, especially the last few years, where, Ferrari were in the thick of the championship battle. They had the better car at that time, but it was Mercedes' consistency and their ability to not make mistakes, and, that helps with their drivers as well, being, Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas, being consistent, being, able to not make mistakes, but also the calls on the pit wall as well, strategy and everything. That's something that Ferrari really need to make sure they hit the nail on the head. Otherwise, we've basically doomed Carlos Sainz's career with Ferrari. Or Leclerc's going to be stuck there for years, and he'll lose his hair before he wins a championship with Ferrari. So at the moment, we're in the second longest drought in the team's history, or second longest title drought. Of course, the longest title drought was between 1979 and 2000, between Jody Scheckter winning in 79 and then Michael Schumacher's first driver's title for the team in 2000. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out there who do not want to see it get to 21 years before we win another, or before Ferrari win another championship. I don't want to see it get to that long either. I'm sure a lot of just fans of the sport in general don't want to see that, because Ferrari is this team that has been around since day dot and has been a big part of Formula One's history, that it's important for them to win, and especially given their commitment, and they're the team that's opposed to cost cap as well. The cost cap's going to be good for everyone, but for a team that's opposed to the cost cap and, pro spending and, blank check on everything, despite all that, and despite their investment, they haven't really achieved anything, so you kind of have to have those results and those achievements to justify all this spending. Otherwise, it's kind of just a fruitless exercise, and it's a big waste of money. And given that we love sustainability and everything, Ferrari have kind of have to go down that route. So who knows, maybe 2022, perfect opportunity with the resetting of the rules for them to rethink their approach. You could totally take advantage of this cost cap and, figure out where they can deploy their resources, where best can they get the advantage. Because, as I said last week, even though we're going to limit the cost, it doesn't mean you can limit innovation. Innovation is something, obviously because Formula One's the pinnacle, innovation is something that could be something as simple as making your dollars go further. And that's where, you look at teams like Racing Point and or when they were Force India previously, that on such a meager budget, they were able to, exceed the dollar per point, or points per dollar that they were scoring. They were doing so well. And McLaren as well, the direction it seems like they're going in is that they want this cost cap so they can maximise how much, the amount that they're allowed to spend in being able to catch the top teams. So Ferrari, I think, just needs to take a good hard look at themselves, and hopefully they are in this time where there's no racing, about how they rethink their approach, and obviously cleaning house with Vettel, and starting afresh, hopefully with two new drivers. Leclerc's not new. They're able to start again and hit this new regulation era on the head and come out strong, because that's the only way for them to survive, in a climate where it's becoming more and more difficult for road car makers and manufacturers to keep spending the money that they do. And of course, Renault potentially the first on the chopping block if this financial crisis worsens. And yeah, just for the history and the passion for Ferrari, it's important for them to win, but winning might mean rethinking their approach on how they do things and possibly going down a new avenue. So I wanted to get that off my chest because of all the bashing that's been going on about Seb. It's not his fault that he didn't win championships completely. Yes, he made a lot of mistakes, and there was some championship defining mistakes in that as well. But like with Alonso, if he had the car and if he had the team with him all the way, it would have been easier to hide those mistakes and to be able to still win. When Vettel made mistakes at Red Bull, he still was able to win the championship because they had the best car. And ultimately, without the best car, it's kind of half or 50% of the puzzle to be able to win the championship. So, yeah, you're not going to just give him push bikes and say, oh yeah, there you go win the championship with that. You need to have the car there. You've got to have the team there too. Want to see less errors in the pit stop and everything. So, yeah, that's that. Otherwise, basically they're doomed for not winning a championship at all. And as I said, Carlos Sainz is going to lose Leclerc's going to lose his hair. Sainz is, I don't know what Sainz is going to do, but yeah, there you go. It's not going to be good if they don't change things internally to be able to become like, or don't become like Mercedes, but just adopt that same principle, about being clinical and making sure that you're consistent and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, that's that. That's that. And quickly, while we're still talking about Ferrari and stuff, happy birthday to Formula One. So on the 13th of May 1950, we had the first ever Formula One Grand Prix, British Grand Prix at Silverstone, of course, and Ferrari were there, a part of it. So, 70 years on, it was going to be a big celebrations this year, I guess, or there still will be, with Formula One when it does get restarted, about celebrating the history. And it's been good to see that, YouTube channel and social media and everything, they're replaying these old races and stuff like that, just highlighting bits of the sport's illustrious history. So, happy birthday. It's May the 13th. I think, what's the next Grand Prix? Monaco on the calendar we would have been heading to. Now we had the Dutch Grand Prix and the Spanish Grand Prix. So, yeah, it's, as I said last time, the calendar in my mind has just completely disappeared because, we haven't done any live blogging, we haven't done any reporting on races and done reviews and stuff like that. But, July 5th is still the hope that we can get everything back up and running, and all pending safety and security for the teams, the drivers, everyone involved. We just want to make sure that everything's safe before we do start getting racing again. If you guys had any feedback on Ferrari and the decision to go with Carlos Sainz or Ricciardo to McLaren, or what do you think Ferrari's real problem is, and what will happen with Sebastian Vettel, get in touch on Twitter at @HitTheApexMedia. Be happy to answer a few questions if you had any. That would be great. And quickly, I wanted to end this podcast, as we have been talking the last few podcasts about other media and stuff. So I did make a reference to Tiger King last week. That's because I did have the intention to finally watch it over the weekend, in which I did. Pretty unreal. Of course, that's my first reaction. Had a few laughs. It all happened. It's all true. But ultimately, I think the animal cruelty part was kind of upsetting to me. It's like, so they talk about how, they love these big cats and everything, but the cruelty aspect involved in it was pretty sad. Joe Exotic, of course, the proclaimed Tiger King, and there he is, shooting tigers, putting them down inhumanely. There was a incident involving burning down, a studio which also housed some alligators as well. It's like, really? So, what do these alligators do to be burnt down as part of this little stunt? So, unreal. Had a few laughs, but again, I don't agree with all those tiger parks and everything being kept in captivity. But it was funny, and all the talk now about potentially having a Hollywood movie, or even a dramatized Netflix series. Not that this was totally not dramatized at all. Nicolas Cage to play Joe Exotic or something like that. That would be quite funny. And while we're talking about comedy, had some pretty sad news earlier this week with the passing of actor and comedian Jerry Stiller, who passed away at the age of 92. Best known, of course, as Frank Costanza from Seinfeld, George's father. And yeah, it was like, wow, he was such a great character. They recast Frank Costanza, of course, because being a bit of a Seinfeld freak, as I am, not as much as other people I know, and one of my best friends who actually got me into Seinfeld in the first place, we constantly have little trivia things, and more often than not, I'm the one learning off him than if I come up with something and he doesn't know it. But yeah, no, he knows so much more about Seinfeld than me. And he was the first one who, ages ago, mentioned that Jerry Stiller is Ben Stiller's dad, which, when we got the news on Monday that, or was it Sunday, that Jerry Stiller had passed away, a lot of people found out that, he was Ben Stiller's dad as well. So it was kind of like, oh, well, I knew that, but I wouldn't have known that if my friend hadn't told me, kind of thing. So it's just trivia like that kind of make this sort of stuff fun. But yeah, Jerry Stiller was recast as Frank Costanza in season 5. Up until the end of season 4, there was another actor, I can't remember, who played George's dad, and probably one of the best recasts ever, because Jerry Stiller just had this personality as George's dad, and it kind of got along really well with the mum as well, Estelle, played by Estelle Harris. It was just a funny dynamic, and you would just hate to be George, living at home with his parents. They're so funny, those situations. And I was watching an episode last night about where George is going to go become a bra salesman, and over dinner, with his mum and dad, they're talking about bras and all the intricate details about a bra, and they're having an argument about what the bra's made out of and all that as well. So just moments like that you've got to go watch on YouTube if you haven't watched Seinfeld before, or if you feel like revisiting some of those best ofs. He was great with the bloopers as well, Frank Costanza or Jerry Stiller. You Want a Piece of Me, the fight with Elaine in the police station. Some of my favourites was obviously Festivus. There's a Festivus for the rest of us. The airing of grievances. I know me and my workmates, we no longer do Christmas parties, but we do Festivus instead. We have a celebration for Festivus. We haven't ever brought a metal pole and done an airing of grievances before, but we just like the thought of it. And then, of course, Serenity Now as well. Serenity Now. So, yeah, one of the best shows ever made, one of the best sitcoms, totally timeless. Here we are in 2020, and you could watch this show from, the right throughout the 90s, and it just still has a lot of relevance to today, the dynamic between people and relationships and stuff like that. And, Larry David, a genius, I think, comedic genius with the way he invented this show, and of course Jerry Seinfeld's input in that too. So there's something for you guys to do over the weekend if you didn't already have any plans, or you feel like having a bit of a laugh. I know it's been difficult for a lot of people the last few months with what's going on with the COVID business, but it's important that we all have a laugh and enjoy some of the more lighter things in life, and Seinfeld is a perfect recipe for that. Or you could go watch The Tiger King if you fancy that. But I would recommend Seinfeld. I think it's a lot better. So you're going to have some good fun with that. Otherwise, there's more I want to talk about, but I kind of, getting close to the hour mark, 53 minutes we're into this podcast. So I might just wait until next week. Because, what I did want to talk about, obviously, with supercars and stuff, I think next week we're going to actually have a calendar or a revised calendar available. There's been talk about, which rounds are going to miss out, and potentially ending the season early next year in February, where the Bathurst 12-hour normally is. And, of course, that would mean that they wouldn't run the 12-hour as it is normally. Instead, it'll be a final round for supercars. There you go. I think that's a sign that it's time to call it a day today. As Seb would say, Grazie, Ragazzi. That's the final Grazie, Ragazzi from Seb in a Ferrari. Hopefully he is able to win a race or two this year. He's got nothing to lose now before he makes his next move. But other than that, thanks for tuning in, guys. As I said, if you've got any feedback about whatever all the news that we've had this week, if you want to share your opinion, head over to Twitter @HitTheApexMedia, and I'll endeavour to have some chat with you guys. Otherwise, enjoy your weekends, and I'm sure I will be back next week to talk more. Thank you and see you later.